Hello, welcome to the Current Review podcast. And as you can first see, something's a little different. I now have a co-host, David Say. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I think this is going to be a really cool opportunity. But before we get to that, I just want to say some things have changed. So we're going to change up our formats, we're going to change up our episodes, and most importantly, we're going to have a bunch of exciting content to discuss and some even new stuff that we have planned. But before we get into it, I want to introduce David Say. So he's our new co-host, and he has great engineering background, and I think it's really exciting to have him on. So thank you very much, David.
Hey, everyone. I'm glad to be joining Andrew here to talk about really cool things in the EV space or tech in general. I kind of fell into the EV space about 2 years ago with my own Rivian R1T and fell in love with doing road trips. So can chat all day, have lots of fun stuff to go through, and can't wait to see where we go. So yeah, let's do it.
Definitely. So I think before we start this episode, we just have to discuss the EV landscape today. And I think this is probably one of the most interesting spaces to be in right now, at least in the tech area, because you have like smartphones. I mean, they're all interesting and fine, but there's really not a bunch of differences between them. So you got like an Android, iPhone, very similar, at least how they function. Now with cars, you have internal combustion and EV. There's two completely different powertrains. And the worst thing is they're highly politicized. A lot of people don't know much about them. And then the worst thing is a lot of people who don't know a lot about them have very strong opinions on them. So it's a very difficult space to be in right now. And I think you probably have a very similar experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting in that the minute I mentioned that I drive an EV, and actually we've gone since going EV to a full electric household, that I sort of get like one of two comments of like, oh, very cool. I'm thinking about going to EV myself. All right. But I haven't switched to yet for XYZ reasons. Most of the time it's around, oh, I do long drives and that's not possible. And I've been from where I live in Maine all the way down to Austin and back, or Colorado and back, and Miami and back. And so that's not true. You can do long road trips in an EV, or it's like, oh, those EVs are terrible for the environment. They suck. It's even dirtier because where do you think the energy comes from? It's coming from coal and gas and all those sort of things. And my response is actually, to be honest, I mean, it is nice to have a cleaner vehicle, but I got an EV because I just thought it was a better vehicle. The 0 to 60 time is super fast, a crazy amount of horsepower, no gears, and no oil changes. So overall, I think EVs are just a better product from getting you from point A to point B in a lot of different ways. So I don't know. It's really weird. I don't know about you, Andrew. You being down south, I'm sure it's highly polarized down there.
Yeah, definitely. But I think the first overarching thing is I totally agree just with the value proposition. I think right now it's kind of ridiculous to buy a gas car just based on used deals, even new deals too. Because like we can say you can get a used Model 3 right now for $18,000 easily. Okay, I don't think you can get a better car than that in that price range, just in terms of performance, in terms of driving characteristics, in terms of tech. And obviously, EV charging capabilities, it's a lot better than a lot of other EVs in that price range. But even just compared to gas cars, it's like you're just getting a whole different animal than basically any other thing in that area. And even new, it's like I was doing a price comparison earlier today. The Ford Mustang Mach-E, you can get an all-wheel drive one for around $45,500 brand new. The Ford Edge ST is $50,000. That's crazy. And the Ford Mach-E has better performance. It's much more efficient, obviously, because it's electric, and it's probably going to cost way less in maintenance, and more likely it's going to be a lot more reliable. So I just think right now I don't really see a point in going out and buying a gas car, and especially when people I know like are like, hey, I recently bought a gas car. It's just for me, it just like doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like I think I'm going to take more of a probably controversial stance, and I don't think there's a point in buying anything pure gas. I think, at least with hybrids, because with gas cars, whenever you're slowing down, you're just basically throwing out all that energy to heat. And it just, from like an engineering standpoint, it's just a waste. Whereas at least with a hybrid, you can recapture some of that energy and use it later. So I think when you just take this more analytical approach to electric cars, you're just like, well, one thing's very inefficient. It also burns through a lot of energy and it costs a lot of money. and then the other is more affordable, a lot more efficient. I think you probably have a similar stance too.
A lot of people, for me, actually, it was a combination of performance, but also when I started crunching the numbers in terms of total cost of ownership, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
for a brand new EV, you're paying a lot more upfront, but like you're saying, actually, if you look hard enough on a used EV, you can get a used EV that's very comparable or cheaper than an ICE vehicle, right? So
Hmm.
that could be a non-issue depending on what you're buying and where you're buying it from. And then the other is gas versus electric. I will say, I have priced out the DC fast charging stations, and the prices are going up where it's
Hmm.
pretty standard where you can see 50, 55 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yes.
And per mile, that ends up being about the same that you pay in gas. But if you think about it, you don't DC fast charge that often.
Hmm.
Majority of your driving is around town. And as long as you have an at-home or a level two charge nearby, that those are typically free or cheaper, right? Or I think most of the level twos that I've seen that are charging an order of magnitude of like 10 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that, like really, really cheap.
Yeah.
So it's really not that big of a deal. And then if you price that out, right? Most places in America, I think the average electricity price in America is around 15 to 16
Yeah.
cents
That
a
sounds right.
kilowatt hour. And when you look at those numbers, you're saving a huge amount of money in gas, right?
Hmm.
And so that's just the fuel costs. Then when you go to the oil changes, right? I mean, maintenance for an EV is literally just, I think, tires and windshield wiper fluid. And then
Yep.
all the other stuff is the same. Like if someone crashes into you, I mean, that's going to happen in any vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to have to pay for that anyways. And same thing with cracked windshields and all that other stuff. So the only real ongoing, like regular scheduled maintenance thing that you have to do is tires and windshield wiper fluid, which
Hmm.
let's be honest, that does not equate to, oil change every 3,000 miles or so, right?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
and especially just when you lay it out like that, it just kind of makes all the political arguments against EVs just look kind of ridiculous because there's just so much information that's incorrect circulating around the internet. It's honestly it's difficult to, argue some of my points with people who just have almost exist an entirely different sphere of existence. It's very interesting. And then you got some interesting Facebook comments I think you wanted to talk about on some of your electric car posts. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Let me see if I can bring up some of them here. Let's see.
So a little context: David purchased some ads for his electric car charging website called Chargely on Facebook, and the Facebook audience did not seem to really take a good or a great liking to it. We can say.
Well, yeah, in true Facebook fashion, um, it just went crazy for all the wrong reasons. I think I got like how many, like yeah, like 500 reactions and like over almost 100 comments. And you can see most of them, right, are coming from people who are trying to trash EVs, which, hey, I mean, it's America. You're granted your perspective, and it's the internet, so it's even more toxic. But I think there's a lot of things that we can sort of kind of just shoot, kill in terms of myths, right? Like, where do you think the electricity comes from? There's no windmill powering them solar panels. Um, all right, yeah, it's all coming from a mix, right? But I think
Hmm.
actually your friend over at Engineering Explained, right?
Hmm.
Jason, he did a really great breakdown in terms of the overall carbon footprint of EVs compared to ICE vehicles. Even though you're not getting everything from 100% renewable sources, it is still like way greener in the overall life. I think you break even in like 1.5, 2
Yeah.
years for the most part. And I think a big part of it goes to your point, Andrew, which is like the efficiency, right? Going
Hmm.
electricity directly to drive. I think like the energy conversion efficiency is like 90-95%, right? Whereas
Hmm.
for an ICE vehicle, it's like less than 50. Right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So ICE vehicles are around. There's a great Motor Trend and the Department of Energy. Well, they use Department, I think EPA data, and then Motor Trend made into like some very nice graphs, and you can see them. So when you factor in regen braking, an electric car is around 88 to 91% efficient, which is just pretty crazy to think about. whereas a gas car is about 25% efficient. And that's just because, well, the process of combustion is not super efficient. There's a lot of heat that's used as waste. And yeah, it's just coming from this perspective, just the engineering world and just looking at it, it's just like the answer is very clear. Then obviously there's a lot that gets lost in the noise, like some of these comments you're showing here, and some of them, if you scroll through it, some of these are actually pretty funny. And I mean, I'm used to some of these comments too because I get them on my articles before.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of information out there that is not correct, and it's kind of bad because it's like something that shouldn't be politicized because I just don't see why. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting. And then to talk about your point regarding the emissions calculation. So I actually did run some calculations here in South Carolina. So this was with some data from, I think it was the Union of Concerned Scientists in our specific area. So most of the energy where I live in Clemson, South Carolina is on nuclear.
Hmm.
And um, based on that, we're looking at total carbon output of around 98 miles per gallon equivalency.
Hmm.
And basically, rinse some of these numbers. So compared to an average gas car, it would take like around four. If you also factor in the carbon output from the battery production, which
Hmm.
that's very hard to get data from. So these are just very loose numbers.
Hmm.
But at least where I live, you drive 10,000 miles a year, you're looking at about 4 to 5-ish years that it would take to break even, which is still, when you think about it, it's like you are kind of front loading the carbon emissions, but
Hmm.
then it's a lot better for the environment now to drive an electric car than a gas car brand new, because a gas car is just going to continuously produce carbon dioxide throughout its existence. But then an electric car, as a grid goes cleaner, the emissions are actually going to keep going down for electric cars. Whereas gas cars, they can't because it's just gasoline you're going to use, unless there's some new fuel that gets developed. But I doubt that would
Yeah.
happen in the next decade.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one that I find interesting is about fires, right? So look out for
Mm-hmm.
this fire starer. I'm assuming he's trying to fire starter. And I saw a
Yes.
statistic recently that was interesting, which actually the rate at which battery electric vehicles catch on fire is less than the rate at which gasoline cars catch on fire, because gasoline
Yep.
cars catch on fire as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know there's a longer history, but I was taking I forgot who it was, and I post the link later in terms of the stats of the battery electric fires versus gas car fires. But it's something like gas cars catch on fire 2 or 3 times more often than battery electric cars. So yes, cars catch on fire, but gasoline
Mm-hmm.
cars actually catch on fire more often, more frequently than battery electric vehicles. So I mean,
And the big difference is you can light up a cigar at an Electrify America station. You can't at a gas station.
exactly, exactly. So I'm not a smoker, but for all those smokers, it's safer for you to quote unquote fill up an electric vehicle than it is to fill up your gas car. So, there's that too. Yep. And I think the last one to address, which I mean, it's fair. So the truth be told, it takes longer to fill up, quote unquote, fill up your electric car versus a gas car, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that is true. I think the thing that needs to change in terms of people's mindsets, which is how long and how often should you really be stopping? Because,
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, from my own personal experience, I've done a lot of long cross country road trips throughout my life. And one of the crazier ones was I did from New Jersey to Colorado in one straight shot in 30 hours by
Wow.
myself. I I'll safely say I don't think I want to do that ever again
Yeah,
because
I
that was
couldn't
not a good
imagine.
idea. And really, like, it's not healthy for the human body to be sitting in the car for
Yeah,
for
hundred
those
percent.
long periods of time. What I found for my vehicles, I mean, not all vehicles have the same range, but I do think a lot of the newer ones they're shooting for that 300 miles of range, which is I think
Mm-hmm.
is just perfect for most Americans and road trips. And for 300 miles, I usually end up going for about 2.5 hours. And
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, what I found is stopping every 2.5 hours ends up being just about right for myself and my travel companions. And
Yeah.
then by the time we go to the bathroom and we get a couple snacks and and all that other stuff, it ends up being about a half hour, 40 minutes anyways.
Hmm.
Or not really noticeable. There are a couple times where you are waiting around for a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. It gives you a chance to eat without trying to drive and eat, which is not safe anyways. So it's one of those things where I think it's one of people just have to sort of change their mindset about traveling, like long haul travel, and
Hmm.
what's really required to get you from point A to point B safely. You know,
Yeah,
I don't
and
know
I
what your
think
thoughts are.
especially with yeah, well, I
Yeah.
mean with range, it's like right now gas cars are just like a symbol of excess. It's like you don't really need 600 miles of range, like because you're not going to be driving 600 miles without stopping. I guarantee you, no one does that, unless you're a camel, because it's just ridiculous that someone would be. Because I had a debate with one of my professors about this. So he's like, yeah, but he's like, I don't stop when I drive on a road trip. I'm like, you don't stop at all. So you're saying like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. you're going to be driving, no bathroom breaks, no food, no nothing. And it's like that's just ridiculous. It's like no one actually does that. And with electric cars, it's adequate. It's exactly what you need. You probably need around 300 miles of range. That's a good number. So then you drive 300 miles, and then probably at about that time, even if I was in a gas car, I would probably want to take a break as well. And so whether that's going into Walmart, maybe buying a snack, using the bathroom, it's like, well, you can also have your EA station there, plug in, and within 20 minutes, if you're in a faster charging EV like a Kia EV6 or something, you're on your way. You're going to be ready to go. So I think, yeah, definitely in terms of charging, there's just a lot of misconceptions about that. And once you actually live with one, you're like, okay, this works out fine. Like I don't have any issues. But I'd say my overarching point with charging is just level one and level two charging. I think it's perfect. It's amazing, especially for like me when I drive to school, I can plug in my Chevy Bolt, which is my rental right now. And so I'll plug that car in. And as all the other gas cars are sitting there in the parking lot, just taking up space, my car is actually charging. It's actually gaining energy as it's sitting there versus just being static. So I think that's just the coolest thing that the downtime in an electric car can mean time in which energy is added to the vehicle. Whereas in a gas car, that just doesn't happen. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool when you think about it.
I think what we're going to need to think about just as a society is incorporating more charge stations into other activities that we're doing anyways. So I think you're right, like, having level two stations kind of just everywhere. So in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
when I think about, I was just in the city the other day and there's still parking meters there, believe it or not. And in my mind, you would replace those parking meters with charge stations, right?
Yeah.
And so you would just have them anywhere, everywhere, right? So it's just a matter of like just remember to plug your car every time you stop it, and they're just going to be kind of everywhere. And you can sort of eat in charge or sleep in charge and do all these other things to charge your car while you're not in it, so that you'll have a full charge and you can literally go wherever you want when you get back to your vehicle.
Yeah, 100% agree. And especially for like areas in which there's not a lot of parking, it's like these can just be the new like parking meters of the day. So like maybe they could charge a fair amount of money. Maybe they could charge like, I don't know, $5, $10 an hour for you to park if it's like a very expensive area where there's not a lot of parking. And then it's like a win-win. The person going there gets electricity, and then the person's also paying the state or local government or whatever there. So yeah, I think definitely a robust level two charging network is really key for EV adoption, and also helps out a lot of people who like live in an apartment.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of though, I think um, if I think it'd be interesting to move on to this segment of like there's a couple of people I think that are doing EV charge stations and what it could be better than other people out there. I know I've heard a lot of news about this company called Rove out in California, and
Hmm.
they've got I forget it's like 80 stations or something like that, and they've invested a lot in terms of the space itself. They imagine because gas stations you are pulling through after every 3 or 4 minutes, but actually my go-to procedure at gas stations a lot of time was I pull in, I'd fill up, and then I'd pull forward into a different parking spot after filling up to allow other people behind me, and then just go to the store. Like Bucky's is a great example where we would fill up and then we would go to the plethora of parking and then spend time at Bucky's. I think in the EV charging context, which Rovis I think created, the assumption is that you're going to move your car, you're just going to plug in, and then you're going to spend 40 minutes in. I think they got a lounge area, some Wi-Fi, and some really nice food options and that sort of thing. And they're kind of really thinking about people and what they're going to do for 30, 40 minutes in an enjoyable way.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's another one here for us to maybe take a look. I'll say this one's on my personal list to visit. Rivian has converted an old gas station out in Yosemite, and
I saw that.
they call it the Yosemite Charge Post. And
Yeah, that's
just look at
so
this thing.
cool.
It looks so beautiful. It's out in a national park, one of the most popular national parks in the U.S. And if you look at this, they've got kind of like everything for you, and sort of like a similar concept. What I'm talking about is really like putting a lot of thought into what people are going to be doing while they're waiting for 30 to 40 minutes.
Hmm.
They've got like activities. Here they say you can top up in 20 minutes. And I think it depends on the car. I think the cars are going to get faster and faster. Or we're hearing stuff from Volvo that they've got like a car that can fill up in like 5, 10 minutes or something like that, right? Crazy.
Hmm.
But then, they've got like, coffee, snacks, a 24-hour restroom,
You
you
know, it's in
know,
California when they say there's a code for the bathroom.
that's true too. One thing, and this is not, again, not unique to EVs,
Hmm.
just good rest area operations hygiene is clean bathrooms that are just available.
Yep.
Because I've definitely come across my fair share of not so great bathrooms, and at least for
Yes.
me, that does make a difference.
Yeah, when you
Yeah,
go to some like gas station in Alabama, you don't know what you're encountering.
yeah, yeah. But anyways, I mean, I think there's an opportunity for as new people as more charge stations go out across the country in key areas where there's maybe some charging deserts or longer stretches without key chargers. The hope is that more and more people will take a nod from what Rove and Rivian are doing in terms of design and thoughtfulness of what a really great charge stop could be.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other thing too is this is very fitting with Rivian being a luxury brand because if you want people to buy your product, you've got to make it more luxurious or whatever compared to like internal combustion. And I think right now electric cars are doing it pretty well. But then like you can also see someone maybe you bought Audi e-tron GT. They just spent $105,000 on the sedan, and then they're charging in Electrify America parking lot. That's in like one time I was driving through Tucson, Arizona, and or sorry, Phoenix, Arizona, and I was at an EA station at like 11:30 at night in an abandoned parking lot, and then there was like shopping carts sitting on like it wasn't great, and so if you're buying a very expensive car, you're gonna want a premium charging experience. And I think what people like Rivian are doing, and then also like what Rove is doing, that's a really good step in the right direction because that helps make the charging experience more luxurious. And this looks cool. Like this is way cooler than a gas station. So
Yeah, I mean, I
definitely
would
a
love
step in
to
the right
go here
direction.
and not charge.
Hmm.
But like you were saying before, being an EV driver now, I kind of just look for those opportunities to sort of combine an activity that I'm going to do anyways with a charge because it's just a
Yeah.
lot nicer and a lot more convenient. So yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
absolutely.
Like there's some hiking places around here where they have charging, and it's like that's cool because then it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
One other segment that we had on today, so we kind of busted the myths that we said we were going to do because I
Yeah,
think there's just so many of them. But I think one overarching point is that electric cars are just becoming a lot more affordable now, and a lot of people still may not think they are, but they are. And I think we can actually look through history too. Like even a 2012 Model S was like 78,000 back in the day. Now a 2012 or sorry, no, 24 Model S is 76,000, and the car went from 256 to now 402 miles of range, went from around 360-ish horsepower to now 670. So just like the specs, the performance, all this stuff is just incredibly better now. But I think some of the better deals are actually in the used market, and one of these in particular is the Volvo C40 Recharge. And this is going to start our new segment, which is going to be our deal of the week. And I think 100% the new deal of the week is a Volvo C40 Recharge. So these cars are based on Volvo's platform. So this actually is used with the Polestar 2 as well. So Volvo XC40 Recharge, Volvo C40 Recharge, and the Polestar 2. It's a pretty good platform. I don't really hear many issues with it. It seems to be pretty reliable. But the crazy thing is with these cars is just how much they've come down in price. So these Volvo C40s, a lot of them were Hertz rentals, just keeping that in mind. But these cars were about $60,000 brand new if you had the ultimate package. And right now, you can get these things for way, way less. We're looking now for like around $25,000, which is pretty insane compared to the price new. Um, so yeah, this is a fantastic deal. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an odd stigma against used rental vehicles because I know a lot of people who have beat up on their rentals when they've rented cars, but I personally have bought a vehicle from Hertz car sales before, and it was fantastic. And talking to them, there's actually a pretty high criteria, a high level, a grading that they have to do in order to be able to sell the vehicle directly like they are. If it doesn't meet that criteria, it goes into like a secondhand other market and it gets actually put out in circulation. So you could actually be buying a lower quality Hertz rental car out there from a different dealer that sort of made its way through all the wholesale markets and not even realize it versus getting things directly from Hertz car sales that you have shown here. They usually tend to,
Interesting.
they need to be of the highest quality. So, and they do like a pretty in-depth inspection in order to make sure it meets that standard for them to list it. And because of this stigma, it goes even lower. Like they're just trying to unload these things. And so personally, I actually think that the former rental vehicles from Hertz specifically are actually like the best deals that are out there. And
Mhm.
with their readjustment out of EVs, which it's kind of understandable because I think they botched it operationally, to be honest. And they're
Yeah,
giving EVs a bad stigma, but it's great for anyone that's looking to buy one instead of rent one, because there's a lot of great deals out there. So yeah, I think it's a
interesting.
great place to go if you're interested. But that's the other thing I hear a lot is like, oh, I can't get an EV because they're too expensive. Well, I think you're showing right here that if you look in the used car market, you can get some really nice vehicles at a great discount. Because I think with the C40 starting off, I think it was starting at like 65, 70K or something like that.
Yeah, so the Ultimates are about 62. The
Okay.
base models are around like 55, but still expensive car. And it's pretty insane that you're getting this for well off or well under 50% off the original price. No, I will say like some of these, this is an ex rental at Echo Park, so it's not from Hertz. It looks like it's in pretty good condition overall. I know Echo Park always has decent cars. Um, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just what you're getting a 402 horsepower car that can go from 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, 150 kilowatt peak DC fast charging speeds. This is a pretty good car for the price. Like, even, I don't think I mean, looking brand new, you can't get any gas powered car for around that price brand new. Obviously, you're not comparing it to a brand new car, but still, I think it's worth bringing up. And
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I mean Volvo's a luxury brand, right? So the fact that
Mhm.
you can get any Volvo at like this price is pretty fantastic. And it's a pretty good sized vehicle. It's a crossover, right? So there's a lot of great storage space. I know my sister has an XC40 Recharge and it's great for her and her two kids and dog. So it's really a good deal. I think I have to agree with you. Another point though on like the whole stigma against rental cars because people drive them really hard for a gas vehicle, right? What I've heard from people when
Mhm.
they drive the rental vehicle really hard, it's usually like them really revving it up and like
Right
accelerating
landing.
fast and braking or having concerns about the mechanics or the mechanicals right within the engine because there's a lot of things that can break in an engine. There's a lot of things. That's why when people buy used cars, they used to be like, oh, I have to get my mechanic to look at this just to make sure it sounds and is running okay. In an EV, you don't have any of those issues. It's just an electric motor, right? And there's really not
Mhm.
much you could do to damage the windings by accelerating too quickly. If anything, I mean, it's one of the advantages because there's nothing that could go wrong by except maybe you bulb the tires a little bit, but that's pretty easy to inspect, right?
Yes, I will say for the Volvo C40 Recharge, tires for that car cost a fortune. They're about like 350 a piece, which is insane. Like for comparison, Polestar 2 tires, even with the 20 inches, are like around 150 a piece. So 350 a piece is insane for the Volvo C40. But if you got new tires and they last like 40, 50,000 miles, you should be good. But yeah,
And
check on the tires.
I mean, and also, tires in general, it depends on where you live, right? Like I live up in the north, and so, winter tires are really good, sort of like winter or snow rated all seasons are things that people look for. And that rarely comes stock on an OEM. And so a lot of times people end up swapping out the tires or swapping out the wheels anyways. So it's something that I think, you do need to do your research on. I will say the one thing that I've found is disappointing is there aren't a ton of EV specific tire options out there right now. There's only a few
Mm.
brands that are doing that. And I believe like the thing that they're trying to find the balance on is really low rolling resistance so you can maximize your range, but also like longer tread wear because they are heavier vehicles. And you I don't know if it's super noticeable, but I would suspect that you would wear out tires maybe a little bit faster. But again, you know, rotating your tires or changing out your tires is, I think, a little bit better than an oil change every 3,000 miles, Yeah.
Yeah, and if you drive like a normal person, me, probably not so much. But if you drive nicely, it's going to be very nut. The tires probably shouldn't be much of an issue at all. But if you're like flooring air red lights, and especially like you got a rear wheel drive electric car like Volkswagen ID4, Hyundai Ioniq 6, Tesla Model 3, all those cars. If you have a rear wheel drive one, you're like flooring it a lot. Yeah, those tires are probably going to start to wear more, but then you got to factor in that you're driving a car that makes a lot more horsepower than any other normal car, and that also is probably marginally heavier than some of its internal combustion engine counterparts.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's a worthwhile trade-off in the long run if you take a look at the whole picture
Mhm.
where you're saving money and all the other benefits. So for sure. For sure.
100%.
I know Tesla Robotaxi announcement is coming out tomorrow. That's
Yes,
super
that's
exciting.
that's something that's very exciting. So I read the biography. I think it was last year I read it, and so basically in it they were hinting at the robotaxi. And long story short, the
Elon's
yes, the
okay.
Walter Isaacson one.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was very interested in that, reading it, and basically they said there was going to be the original idea was to be just a electric hatchback, probably around $25,000 to $30,000. And then Elon kind of vetoed that and was just like, let's just make it a robo taxi. And me personally, I would take the Model 2 or whatever they would call it, just a
Hmm.
hatchback on $1,000. I think that would have a much more significant impact in the market for like the short term. I mean, if the robo taxi comes out and it's really good with FSD, then yeah, it's probably going to make a mark. But I think it would be cool just having a more affordable option out there. Because I mean, the Model 3 is priced well now. It's still not cheap. It's still like around 35 with the tax credit, which is doable, but it's not a car in the $20,000 range. And yeah, so I think that's a little disappointing, at least hearing that's only going to be robotaxi. I'm not sure what that means for vehicle sales, everything. I don't know. I hope it at least has a steering wheel in it so you can just drive it like a normal car. Because I mean, if it would be an electric car with that's like sporty like that in that price range, it's probably gonna be a lot of fun to drive.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is Elon doing his Elon thing, which this is something that I admire from him, which is sort of like pushing the boundaries of just the industry and transportation as a whole. From my
Mhm.
understanding, right, some of the larger benefits of robotaxi that I think he's looking to see to play out there in society is, are people going to really try to maximize utilization, and sort of like, I don't need a car all the time, and so my car is going to just be out there giving people rides, and sort of like we don't have, maybe there's no need for parking lots anymore, right? If cars are always just around looking for where they are demand, and you don't have the issue with like city bikes in New York. I always had that issue of balancing, of getting the bikes to where they are. They actually have trucks that pick up bikes and rebalance. If the car drives itself, then there's no issue. I will say, I would personally, I'll be very skeptical if I see a car on the road with no human being in the front, in the pilot controlling it, and that would personally make me a little bit worried. But I will say, from someone who has used Tesla's FSD, that is something that is shockingly good and
Yes, I
better
agree.
than everybody else. And so, if someone could do it, it's probably Tesla. I do have a lot of concerns and a little bit of wait and see. Are we going to have any like Waymo or Cruise incidents, where like I think Cruise had hit somebody and then drag them, or someone had gotten hit by another vehicle and then they got dragged a little bit by an autonomous car. So, have they sort of fixed those sort of issues? Because I think that will put everything really, really far back. But yeah, it's a shame that they aren't doing the more affordable option. I think that is better for most people. I think the
Mhm.
smart thing from Elon, though, from business sense, is when you're working more at the mass scale economy side of the market, the margins are really, really low. And yeah, you're getting growth, but you gotta like it's all about volume and pumping out like a ton of cars.
Yeah,
And I
yeah, no,
don't
for the
know.
record,
Yeah.
the difference was having either like an affordable hatchback that you would actually drive or the robo taxi. And I
Yeah.
think both will probably be affordable, but just the idea of not having a car that you can just physically drive. Because like I have no
Yeah.
idea what this thing's gonna be like. Is there gonna be a steering wheel in there? I don't know. I
I
think
have heard rumors that they're going to remove the steering wheel, but I think from a regulation standpoint, there's going to be very few places that allow that.
But I
Um,
just feel like, and there's like going to be some circumstance where you would need to manually take out, like, especially if it's
yeah.
your car, right? If you're
Yeah.
renting it out, it's like, okay, what if it's like really snowy outside, like
Yeah.
you in Maine, like
Yeah.
that, or just like maybe you're trying to reposition the car, like in your garage or something like that. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. Because I know with any Tesla event, whatever you think it is, it's not going to be what you think it is. So
That's
this
true.
is probably going to age
Maybe it's
poorly before
maybe it's
this
just going
video
to
comes out.
shed its wheels and it's going to start to fly. You know?
Yeah, we don't know.
That would be super cool. But whatever it is, we'll be back next week, I'm sure, to talk all about it and to talk about if it's going to happen or not. Because there's a lot of other things that he's also launched that ended up not happening, like Hyperloop and a couple other things, which I think were great ideas. But it just goes to show that some things are really, really hard to do. And I love that he's pushing the boundaries. We'll see what he has to say and see how people respond to it, including us. So yeah,
100%.
yeah,
Definitely exciting times ahead. And I guess we will speak next week. And by then, we'll know what happens with the Tesla Robotaxi.
yes, awesome. Well, thanks. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.